So I think like when you learn something and then you learn something else, you're building off the bias of what you learned before. And then I think like what I said, you're sort of stuck in that linear projection of the bias that you know. But when you're able to learn something and unlearn it so that you can remove the bias to learn something new, is that where you grow?
Welcome to the Choir Baton, a podcast designed to engage with people in stories, ideas, and inspirations stemming from choir. No other art form, no sport, no hobby, no business requires a group of people to execute a communal goal with just their voices. Join me, your host, Beth Philemon, as I interview guests who are singers, teacher conductors, instrumentalists, and community members. Together, we'll ask questions, seek understanding, and share insight from our experiences in life and in choir. Hi, Choir Baton, and if you are by chance watching the video of this welcome to my living room, which I've never recorded in here before, at least the podcast. Maybe that's actually a lot. Yeah, no, I actually one time recorded an episode in here and it didn't save. So this is the first time I've recorded a podcast episode here in my living room, which is my new office. And more on why and how, if you care, you can check out the blog, and I'm sure I'll be posting about it on Instagram. But I am so excited to dive into today's episode with you, titled "It's Time to Unlearn Choir." So I am hanging out, like I said, here in my living room with my coffee, which I hope maybe if you're listening to this episode or watching with me, like you have a cup of coffee. If you don't drink coffee, hot chocolate, tea, water. That's probably more of what I should be drinking, something with you, because we are going to have a conversation between friends, and it's going to align with the quote that I just had my friend repeat to me from this morning. So it's time to unlearn choir. Before I jump in, I just want to tell you about two things. I'm going to quickly tell you about them at the end of the episode as well, and put links to it in the show notes. But the Choir Baton Teaching membership is closing its doors to new members at the end of August. So if you are interested, make sure you check out the links below for more information, and note that you can only join now until August. There's 3 ways you can join: a yearly pass, a semester pass, or a month-to-month pass. And if you do the month-to-month pass, you can cancel at any time, and like a Netflix subscription, you then have access to it until the end of that month. But the Choir Baton Teaching membership is something I wish I had when I was a teacher, and especially when I had started back after grad school, had experience teaching, then had gone to grad school, come back, and really found I needed essentially like a teachers pay teachers, but for middle and high school singers that related what we were doing like directly to rep. I wanted better coaching on how to approach and teach certain things, and it just didn't exist. And I also didn't know how to teach diverse learners. And when I say diverse learners, I don't necessarily mean by color of skin and socioeconomic status by any means, and all other types of diversity. I mean diverse, I do mean all of that, but I really also mean diverse learners and people that have had teaching experience with music and have been taught music before, and people that have not had formal music training. How do you get them to move together at the same time so students aren't lost and they aren't bored at the same time? And the teaching membership is a product of my quest to figure that out and be unique and innovative in how I teach. And honestly, some of the things I'm going to talk about in this episode also align to the teaching membership and things that I've had to unlearn in order to be a better teacher. Secondly, I also want to talk about the F-flat annual back to school. I got it, also known as FABS, bash that is coming up. If you're listening to this live, it will be August 14th and 15th. It's going to be awesome. It's an online music conference that is pay what you can. Minimum is $1. Suggested donation is $50. The donations from that event go to one of three ways. One, they go to support F-flat. Y'all, you cannot underestimate the amount of time it takes to put these things together. Two, portion goes back to some of the speakers. And three, the other portion goes to a nonprofit of choice, and this year it is Decolonizing the Music Room. I'm going to talk a little bit about F-flat in here as well, because it really aligns with this topic that we are discussing today. I am so honored to be speaking in it. More people singing, even online, tips to ensuring success for your choral experience this year. And again, it all is connected, and it's all connected to this theme that I'm excited to share with you today. So let's dive on into why we should be unlearning choir today. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. I hope you did too. I don't know if you are familiar with this term, unlearning. It's still kind of new to me. This morning I was running with my colleague, former colleague from business school, Anna, and she and I were talking. We always talk about all the things from my internship to things that she is, projects she's working on and consulting that she is doing. She recently graduated. We talk about her son and my nephew, as well as just life things. And at one point at the end of our walk back from having a jog and getting coffee, walk back to the cars, we began talking about this concept of unlearning and all of the unlearning we've been having to do. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that this is the message that we need to hear right now as choir conductors and singers. We need to, and quite frankly, as artists in general, but it's time for us to unlearn choir. So I did a little bit of research, again, familiar with the phrase, and then I began brainstorming things. So let's talk first about what unlearning is. And if you do a Google search, you'll probably come up with a couple of these articles that I am going to talk about today. But I also link them in the show notes as well. But there were two that really stuck out to me. And so I'm going to reference those two in particular. But this concept of unlearning is another form of learning in and of itself. So in his blog, Scott Young says that unlearning is not about forgetting. It's about the ability to choose an alternative mental model or paradigm. When we learn, we add new skills or knowledge to what we already know. And when we unlearn, we step outside the mental model in order to choose a different one. And if you've heard of unlearning in the last couple of months, it's probably been attributed to racism and how we are having to unlearn biases, particularly if you are not someone of color, how you are working to unlearn biases that you have had, that you grew up with, whether they are intentional or unintentional. But unlearning is something that extends and integrates itself into our lives, even beyond that incredibly important conversation and work that we're doing. So again, unlearning is not about forgetting, it's about the ability to choose an alternative mental model or paradigm. When we learn, we're taking new skills or knowledge and adding it to what we already know. So I love analogies that talk about food, right? So in a sense, it's if you have like a cupcake base, and when you're learning, you're like continuing to add decorations on the cupcake. But when you unlearn, you are in a sense like taking the cupcake and making it cake pops, crumbling the cake. That's the essence of what it kind of makes it, and then making something new out of what was previously involved in it. And so it's kind of similar and different, all at the same time. And Scott Young also talks about this thing called confirmation bias. When something contradicts your current understanding, you are likely to dismiss it. He's not the guy that came up with confirmation bias. It's a psychological thing that's been around, or psychological, also known as psychology, thing that's been around for a long time. But it's saying that when you see something that you already know or believe to be true, it is only further confirming that bias that you have within you. And this is what I see more than ever happening right now in choir, as we are not able to rehearse and perform like we have for years, right? Like thousands of years. And it's so interesting. I've talked with many friends that have said, this is not choir. You know, I say favorite loosely, but my favorite thing has been when all of this started and we had to move to online teaching. You know, people were like, this is not choir. Virtual choirs are not choirs. You know, and really like leaning into saying that this is not it, whatever. And I'm going to pick on my friend Chris Muntz here, because he was like saying that, and he just interviewed Eric Whitaker on his podcast. You should go check it out. Chris is a good guy. We were talking this past week, and then I was giving him a hard time because okay, you were saying virtual choirs aren't choir, and now you're having Eric Whitaker on your podcast. What are you saying about that, dude? No, I love to pick at him and give him a hard time, because he does the exact same. But that was clearly not just him that was saying it. There were so many other people. And at times I would choose to engage in conversations. Another good fellow friend teacher on Facebook was posting about it. And I wrote to him, I was like, virtual choirs are still choirs. It is just different. It's different, but we have this mentality that if it's not something we know, then it can't be true. And we see that exhibited itself so many times in choir. So I thought I'd give you some examples. I'm gonna take another sip of my coffee here. And I know what you're thinking, Beth. Are you recording this at 8 o'clock in the morning? No, I'm happy to tell you it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But I just brainstormed some of the things that I have unlearned since being in choir. So, would it be me if I said something that was not, that was music literacy related? Of course it wouldn't. So here we go. The first one is that a quarter note equals a beat. A quarter note equals a beat. I have had to unlearn that. That is something that I continue to hear people teach, particularly to beginning or first starting musicians, that the quarter note equals the beat. Not true. A quarter note sometimes equals a beat. In a lot of music, the quarter note equals the beat, but not always. Most uniquely, when we go to 6/8, the quarter note does not equal the beat in 6/8. And because we teach it that way, when people begin to read compound and mixed meters, or any other meter in which the quarter note is not equaling the beat, so 3/2, 2/2, etc., people are having to, they struggle with that. And oftentimes, myself included, that does not make sense to us because it does not fit into what we have learned. And in a sense, you have to unlearn that the quarter note equals the beat, and instead relearn by unlearning that the quarter note sometimes equals the beat. But since we're on this topic, let's also discuss time signatures. I was at a Carol Kruger conference when I finally learned that the top number of a time signature does not tell how many beats are in a measure. Now, I'll say it again one more time if you're like, Beth, you're lying. But this is a huge thing I've had to unlearn in choir, that the top number in a time signature tells how many beats are in a measure. Okay? If you are in simple meter, the top number of a time signature does tell you how many beats are in a measure. But if you are in compound or in mixed meter, that top number tells you how many beat divisions are in a measure. And I was maybe 30, I was maybe late 20s when it was like, cha-ching, and I realized that I'd learned that completely wrong, and I had to unlearn. Next thing, also similar, but related, that sight reading in choir is hard. There is this scared mentality that comes to the forefront of everyone's heart and mind and soul, that sight reading music is hard. And it's not that it's hard, it is that we have not always been taught well how to sight read music. You know, in theory, if we can read a book or read an Instagram post or read something in general, we should be able to read music with that level of fluency. Instead, we have not been taught how to write in musical notation, how to look at musical notation and audibly hear it in our heads. Instead, we are typically taught how to sight read music within one little bitty framework. We're not taught the sounds before the sight part of it. And that tremendously impacts how easy or hard or anywhere in between sight reading could be for us. So in fact, sight reading music is not hard. We just often aren't taught very well. Now, those are pretty specific to music literacy, and we could lean into other things that we've had to unlearn in choir related to sound, right? So, for example, if we are going to be talking about like color of sound that you want. I grew up thinking from my choral experience that we really wanted a warm, type of choir sound like this, and that's what a good choir sound was, like this. Well, then I began to study more, and particularly in my graduate music study, we didn't want everything so totally tall like this. It didn't have to all sound the same. Some of our music could sound like this, and some of our music could sound a little bit brighter and more forward in the mask. I had to unlearn that all choral music had to have the same type of timbre. Instead, I had to relearn that the timbre and in the style in which we are singing from not just the tone color that we're seeking to produce, but also the flexibility, the lightness versus the heaviness, placement, in vowel sounds, ending consonant vowel sounds, etc. That all of that was very dependent on the type of music and style that we were singing. Heavens, let's talk about how many times people have to unlearn whether or not head voice, chest voice, or mix is good, bad, better, or worse. Same thing with vibrato versus straight tone, etc., etc. Many times we grow up in this framework that one is right and one is wrong. This is what a good choir sounds like. This is what a bad choir sounds like. All ending consonants should have a schwa sound, like sing versus sing. We could argue like little bitty semantics within the choral sound. Like that could be an entire podcast in and of itself. And the other thing being that everyone's going to have a different opinion about that. But I want to move into a little bit more of conceptual things in choir that I've had to unlearn. And that is, taking a big old swig of coffee for this one. To have or to be a successful choir director, that means you have a lot of choir singers in your program. I'm just going to say that again, deep breaths. To be a successful choir director is directly dependent on the number of students that you have in your choir program. The first school I taught at had a very small choir program. And it was small because the school itself was small, but also there were so many other reasons for the program being small in numbers that had nothing to do with me. They had nothing to do with me. There were pressures placed upon these students to take honors and AP courses like you would not believe. There were passions that they had to take other classes beyond choir. That wasn't that they didn't like me or didn't like choir, but it was just different. And at that point in my career, I felt like to be a successful choir director was having a choir program of 100 plus students on stage representing the work that we were doing in the classroom. And the older that I get, the more I begin to learn and realize and seek to embrace that to be successful is not always dependent upon the number. And you might be thinking, Beth, but your mantra is more people singing. And that is true. I want more people singing. I think there is power in numbers, and that is, but I'm not saying, it's not everyone singing, although I think everyone should be. We have got to learn to go easier on ourselves in regards to numbers. If that is the only data that we are using as choir teachers, the number of students enrolled in our program to determine whether or not we are being successful, we are not using data appropriately. So that is something that I have had to unlearn. And as a side non-choir relatedness, we begin to see this sort of in the influencer space with social media, whereas the number of followers that people have demonstrates their impact. And in fact, we are seeing that the number of followers don't always matter on a social media account. It's other metrics that you don't see by looking at someone's account, such as what their engagement rate is, or even on a website, what a click-through rate is, etc., that really determine, or emails, that really determine how people are interacting with these influencers in that sense. That determines the impact that they are having. And I would challenge you then to think about that in the context of the number of students that you have in your program. This is another one. To have a successful choir, you have to get superiors at festival, concert, anything like that. I felt like very tied to those ratings for many, many, many years. And are these ratings important? How I've experienced them in Tennessee and North Carolina, it's different all across the country and the world. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's essentially, I liken it to like an end of grade test for a student, but this is for a choir program, and it doesn't ever usually occur at the end of the school year like an end of grade test does. Ours would occur in like February or March. I know, like, I think in Arizona, it's even earlier in the year, in the school year than that. And I'm sure there's different examples across the country and across the world that has different things like this. But to have a successful choir, you have to have superiors at festival. One of the most successful choirs that I have ever had went to North Carolina's version of festival, and we didn't get superior, we didn't get excellent, we got good. You're hearing it here. We got good. And that was probably one of the most successful choirs that I'd ever had. And I could tell you all of the reasons why we got good. I mean, other than like, it wasn't excellent singing. I would actually venture to say it was, anyways, it doesn't matter. I don't want them to come across on excuses, because it's not excuses. It is the reason, the fact that like, you can't measure success by this like one point in time statement. Success was actually the fact that everyone was standing on stage and singing, and like cell phones weren't out and people weren't there were so many things that you couldn't see the growth in it to be able to say whether it was one thing or the other. But similarly, if you look at all of the ratings that these festivals offer, I don't know if they're really set on accurate reflections as to the quality of performances that you're hearing, and instead just like attaboy, atta people, atta girl things, because it's so interconnected. And the more I got connected and back in North Carolina, realizing that the people that are adjudicating up in ours are like lifted up, people that are adjudicating also know the directors that are on the stage singing, and it just doesn't mean anything. So that is something that I've had to unlearn in choir. I've also had to unlearn that, these successful choir directors, no hate to those of you that did this. And my friend Adam Palachowitz talks about this, I think in our podcast episode, but I know he talks about on his blog, Choral Clarity, which, side note, I think I love Adam. He is the real deal. But also, if you do not follow his wife on Instagram, Blair, you are missing out. I love Adam. Probably even like part of my love for him is because I just adore watching his wife on Instagram. She is a riot. I actually probably should get her anyways on here sometime to talk about what it's like being things that every spouse should know about being married or in a relationship or partners with a choir director. I bet she would be a riot at that. She's also a Broadway singer, so she understands that artistic asset. But the fact being, so many of these choir, there's nothing wrong with them, right? But like, it's not like Carnegie is calling you up and being like, hey, you in that choir room down in blankety blank place are just killing it. I want you to come up and sing at choir. No, singing at Carnegie Hall is a business. They are inviting you. You are paying to be at Carnegie Hall. Until you are being paid to be at Carnegie Hall as a special guest conductor and your name is on that marquee, like, it means different things. And I used to always think that successful choir directors that were like taking their choirs to Carnegie Hall were so much like that was also something to strive for and achieve for. I'm also going to take a big old sip of coffee on this one because here we go. This next one being that the best choirs sing at national ACDA and state music conferences. Say that again. I have had to unlearn that the best choirs sing at national ACDA and state music conferences. That is simply not true, particularly with national ACDA conferences. From what I have seen in conversations that I have heard, it is that some of the most privileged choirs are singing at national ACDA. Now, am I saying that they are not good? Absolutely not. That is not what I am saying at all. Like the choirs that I've heard at national ACDA are great, but there is also a certain level of privilege that is tied to going to an event like that. That is very important for us to remember. Same thing with the State Music Educator Conference. There is a certain level of privilege that it takes to get a choir to go to one of those and to be selected to sing there. There's a lot of hoops to jump and things to have happen. The best choirs are not always singing at those events because that also lends itself to what do we classify as the best, but I digress. I used to always think that the best music educators were in our universities teaching people how to be future music educators. I thought that collegiate music educators and conductors made a ton more money than high school, middle school, elementary school choir directors did. And, at one point, perhaps that is true, but from the vast majority of people that I know teaching at the university or collegiate level or with a doctorate, they are making less money than many public school teachers. And some of the best music educators that I know are in the classroom teaching and not at the university level teaching future music educators. Now, there are amazing professors out there teaching music ed, don't get me wrong, but there are also people out teaching music ed that have had 3 years of music teaching experience at one school and don't fully understand all of the idiosyncrasies of the public education system today because they just haven't had the experience in different schools like many of the other teachers are. Now, again, I'm not hating on anyone. I'm just sharing with you things that I have had to unlearn in choir. And this last one is most important to us and to me at all. And that is that other people's voices are better than mine. I continue to have to unlearn this every single day as it pertains to choir and as it pertains to life, right? So I had a dream of like even having a choir podcast and this kind of stuff for years, but always felt like I wasn't enough. And if you have been around with me for a long time, you know that this has been a theme in my life, something that I've had to learn. I could have a whole other podcast series on things that I have had to unlearn as a person, particularly within the last 3 to 4 years as I've worked to transform myself and lean into this person that I feel called to be, but for many, many years was so scared to be because I was battling with, quite frankly, like many of the things that I previously listed about choir and choir music education. I felt like to be successful in the choral music industry, if you will, I needed to have a DMA. Now, y'all, I probably will go and get a DMA in 10 years. That's kind of on my list, but that will be because I just want to, and it'll be fun and I can like check that off a list. It's not going to be because I feel called to get a DMA because that will make me successful. Absolutely not at all. Does having a doctorate or even a master's or even honestly an education degree make you totally like successful. That your voice is enough and my voice is enough. And it's funny, I was talking with a good friend a couple weeks ago now, and I'm excited. She's going to do an episode with us about some really cool things that also involves her, singing with Steve Martin and a banjo during a music class. I'll leave you with that fun little cliffhanger. But she was like, I'm not saying you're full of yourself, but like you have to have some like level of confidence to go out there and to like do a podcast and to do this kind of thing. And I chuckled because I was like, I guess that's true. And like, I kind of see it in a multitude of different ways. And I think for me, what it actually is that confidence in myself maybe, or like full of myself, I'm sure to some people it might seem that way. I feel like it's more that I am leaning into this realization and understanding that my voice is enough and that I'm not going to be perfect. Y'all are like literally sitting in my living room in leggings and a sweatshirt with you, drinking coffee. If you could literally see what is behind me here, it's just hysterical. So it's not that I think that I am better than one person or the other. It's not that I have all of the answers, but it's the fact that I know that my voice is enough and what I have to share with the world is enough. And leaning into that to set that example, because I want other people to feel that as well. And it relates to choir so much because as a choir singer, there have been so many times where I was standing beside a Katie Thornsley listening to her sing and in trying to make my voice small and blend and like fit into hers because her voice is so much better than mine. Or being so afraid and listening back to something that I'm going to be sharp or flat or could have sung this better or had better phrasing there. And that my, never being good enough within that. Similarly, as a conductor, I've worked with voices and sought to pull that out of them and seen that fear that their voice is not enough, or that their voice isn't good enough, or their voice doesn't sound like someone else's, or anything like that. And it's quite frankly not true, because as the conductor, I can know and hear that when you're putting those voices together, that the sound possibilities are greater than even that one person. It reminds me of the choir Baton episode with Joan at the beginning of all of this general assignment, where she talked about choir is greater than the sum of its parts. And that is truly the case here. And really the importance of unlearning that one voice or one person is better, but your voice is truly enough. And so, you know, I have continued in this process of unlearning as a person and as a musician, and particularly within choral music, and have not necessarily thought of it within the context or phrase of unlearning, but now see, quite frankly, that that's what it has been. So instead of adding extra icing to the cupcake or sprinkles or decorations, instead, what even choir Baton is seeking to do is to take that cupcake base and crumble it all up and add in icing in a different way, and make different kinds of cake pops, that it's still got that base, right, but it looks different and provides a different experience. It doesn't mean you know, that one thing is different or better than the other. It just is different. And we more than ever need to think about choir within that same context, particularly today. As we are looking at a concert season year, whether you are a community, church, or school choir conductor, singer, composer, accompanist, all, you know, artistic director, executive director, etc., is that we have to unlearn what we have thought choir is, and realize that even this entire past, you know, 4 to 5 months, if you have been in this phase that you have embraced this change and been like, I'm going to roll with it, you know, that even when you get amidst whatever your fall season is going to look like, that there will still be continued unlearning that you have to do. And if you have been someone that has been heels in the ground and like, I am not, like, I do not support this, this makes me feel this way and that way, and I hate this, and yada, 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 that, like, more than ever, I hope that you begin to think through, and you're saying, like, this is not choir, that you begin to think through this process of unlearning what you think choir is, because I firmly believe that choir can be whatever we want it to be, whatever you feel like choir is, and whatever choir is successful in your definition is something that can still be achieved through a variety of different means. But in order for you to get there, you have to unlearn what you have thought choir is. So there is a Harvard Business Review article that I'm linking in the show notes here, that a gentleman by the name of Mark Bonchek is a CEO on thought leadership. He writes about unlearning, and he writes 3 steps to the process of unlearning. And that first step, in it, he says, first, you have to recognize that the old mental model is no longer relevant or effective. Let me say that again. First, you have to recognize that the old mental model is no longer relevant or effective. Okay, so let's put that in choir terms. Pretty easy. First, we have to recognize that choir, how we've always done it, is no longer relevant or effective. And that, quite frankly, is out of our control. You are probably, no matter what, unless you were all literally rolling up to a room without masks and sanitizer, and even talking about coronavirus in the last X amount of months, like, you can't help it. Everyone is recognizing that this old mental model of choir for right now is no longer relevant or effective. So check mark, right, for most of us on that step. And then second step is, he says, second, you need to find or create a new model that can better achieve your goals. Second, you need to find or create a new model that can better achieve your goals. So now I know that there are going to be some of you that hear that and go, well, that's why we have masks in rehearsals, and that's why we have the clear partitions, and that's why we are singing around hula hoops, or we are in larger spaces. And like, you can begin to think through like all of the different iterations that you have done to improve or to make the traditional choir rehearsal performance method fit into the parameters that we have set for us now. But before you begin to do that and delineate all of that, I want to challenge you to first determine, what are your goals? What are your goals in choir? Right? And I can't tell that to you. That is something that you need to go in and think about and write out and make sure, and it doesn't have to be many. In fact, it should probably be one or two, maybe three, because I love the number three. 3 goals that if you don't do anything else in choir, like that is the goal of choir. And then you look at those new and innovative ways in which you are trying to circumvent the parameters in health concerns, or to alleviate health concerns in choir rehearsals and performances, and ensure that all of those new things that you're trying to do align with those 1, 2, or 3 goals that you have for the choir that you are conducting, working with, singing a part of. And if you don't have any of those other parameters, or you feel like lost in any of them, you go back to the goals and you work backwards, and you try to, if your goal is people oriented in regards to relationships, you take that and work backwards as to what you can do. If it is music related, you take that and work back to it. If it's some sort of that, you take that and relate back to it. And any of your goals, that is what you want to make sure that you are always keeping the eye on what and why and how you are doing it in your process of unlearning. So 3 steps he outlines. First, recognize old mental model is no longer relevant or effective. 2, find or create a new model that can better achieve your goals. Right? Not like even equally achieve your goals, not being a substandard attempt to achieve your goals, but can better achieve your goals. And then, and this is perhaps the hardest, is 3rd, you need to ingrain new mental habits. 3rd is you need to ingrain new mental habits. And that can, again, look a variety of different ways. It might be taking the phrase, that's different, and that's okay, and adopting it. Maybe your new mental habit is to begin to think about how innovative you can be as a choral musician. Maybe that new mental habit is always asking why, and never trying to do the same thing exactly the same way each time. But for us to be successful and to really come through these parameters that our industry has had set upon us, whether it's just holding a choir rehearsal in and of itself and singing with one another, or particularly if you're in a school setting as well, that has an extra layer of mandates and expectations, or as I've now combined, mandations, that has had those 2 things connected, that you are seeking to build new mental habits and being flexible within this. You do not have to work harder right now through all of this. Like there's a blogger that always says, busy is not a badge of honor. And so there's so much study out there that tells us that we do not have to work harder to be successful. We have to work smarter. And I think that's another podcast episode for another day, of how we as choral musicians sometimes don't embrace that enough. We choose to work until we can't work anymore, and then work a little bit more, and then say we're done. But again, you are embracing these new mental habits, because it's actually been a long time coming that we need to unlearn choir. And we're seeing threads of this, right? We're seeing threads of this as we begin to look at the music that we are singing and examining, does this music come from a place that is representative of the culture of oppression and racism and inequality within our world? Does this piece come from that? And if so, we can, let go of that for something that comes from a place that has not stemmed from this awful piece of history. If we are, I mean, it's up to you if you're singing it or anything like that. I'm not, if you are singing it, I would really challenge you to use that then as a form of educating why it's wrong and inappropriate, and highlighting that. I do think there is argument for not totally like canceling some of these things, but using them as an opportunity to teach others why. And I could talk more about that, but that in and of itself is very important to our field for us to continue to learn and innovate. I think I'll leave that again for another podcast. Again, I'm not saying that we need to go out and start like, singing all the minstrel songs and other songs that have direct ties to our racist history in the United States. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take that out of our repertoire, but what I am saying is that we shouldn't take it out of our repertoire without educating people as to why, or else people won't ever learn. And I think the music in and of itself will pervade more than we have intentionally expected us to, had we not had learning conversations about the origins of music. We also see threads of unlearning within choral music as we begin to educate ourselves and our community more about the role of voice parts within a choir, and that gender does not define what voice part you are singing, right? But instead, voice parts are dependent upon many, many, many things, including just the composer's whims. I would fight this all the time with sopranos and altos, the sopranos that think the world is ending because they're not singing soprano and they're singing alto, when we actually literally look at a piece of music and the ranges of the two parts are identical. That happens more often than not in music. But again, we're having to unlearn that preconceived notion or bias that sopranos always sing the higher pitches and altos always sing the lower pitches. Although that might be true, I think probably the better thing we need to unlearn there is that the sopranos are the quote unquote better singers, and the altos aren't. Now, but this is also from an alto. I digress. We can also then use the same concept of gender within choirs as we talk about choir uniforms and how and why and what we should be wearing to represent cohesiveness, and what does cohesiveness look like within choir and within performing. And the list goes on and on and on and on. We are growing as an group of people, as a profession that is seeking to begin to unlearn certain things, but now more than ever, as we are embracing technology, as you are listening to this podcast or watching this video on YouTube, we are embracing technology as a society, and we have to embrace choral music as well, and how and why we teach it in the way that we do, because we must be innovative. We must be innovative if we want to continue to be relevant. And innovation does not mean letting go of the past. It just means embracing it with a current mindset, aware of where we've been and where we hope to go, and hoping to integrate those two in unique and impactful ways. I hope that as you move forward from listening to this episode, that you begin to think about what your bias is telling you choir is and what choir isn't. And if you realize that that is a bias creeping into that, that you then seek to unlearn that that notion that choir is not online singing, that choir is not virtual choir, that choir is not singing in a mask, that choir is not singing over Zoom, that choir is not being in a room singing with people at the same time, or this, that, and the other, and begin to think about what choir is and how you can achieve that. I mean, quite frankly, if choir is singing in a room with other people, well, we could all be doing that in Zoom. Are you saying then that choir is singing in a room with other people and hearing other people? Well, maybe it's putting on a recording and you are singing with them. These aren't caveats to be designed as like trickies, gotchas, but instead are meant to challenge you to reframe how and why we're thinking, and to be excited because something that we might have thought was detrimental and is not, is actually opening us up to what is and what could be. It's time for us to unlearn choir, and I would love to hear how you are working through this as well. And I know that it's not easy, and it's some days are easier and harder than others, but I am really excited for what is to continue to come out of this for, in particular, choral music. I am so grateful that you have chosen to be a part of the Choir Baton community by even listening to this podcast episode. I do not take the fact that you are listening to this lightly at all. My common thing, right? This Choir Baton podcast episode, is free. I'm using air quotes, but it's also not free because you are spending your time listening to this, and there is nothing more valuable than your time. And for that, I am so grateful. I do have the Choir Baton teaching membership that I am so proud of and so grateful for, because I hear the comments that other teachers are sending me about how much it's helping them and impacting them. It's like professional development of sorts, like on demand. It is worksheets about how to teach music in unique and innovative ways. There's a monthly mini course that changes, that ties into something that is being relevant at that time of the year, and so much more. There's videos that keep you from having to be in this constant cycle of content creation, particularly this year, and then empowers you to be able to listen to the submissions that your students are making, to then be able to determine how you can best help them grow and learn. And in addition to the Choir Baton teaching membership with singer courses, there's a free one out now on the website, in addition to the free Teaching Choir Amidst COVID course that is on the Choir Baton website as well. This fall, I'm launching the first Choir Baton singer course, which I am so stoked for. And it's unbelievable, actually, because that has been a huge passion of mine for several years. And I know like more than ever that the timing of the release of that is so insanely aligned to what people in the world right now need. Not every choir is in a place where they can provide programming and musicianship opportunities for singers because of a myriad of constraints. And I hope that the Choir Baton singer course is an opportunity for them to engage in that way, as well as an opportunity for people that are singing virtual choirs on TV, or it's popping up on their TikTok or their Instagram or morning news, etc., and say, like, I've always wanted to sing in a choir before. I want to learn what this is and what it's about, and so that when we are able to sing in a traditional kind of choral rehearsal setting, or even I want to join and see what my choir is doing now, they have like a resource to ground them in what to expect and where to go. It covers basic overall, like, what is choir? What are voice parts? What is my voice? How do I know my voice? How do I warm up? What's a rehearsal like? In addition to learning a song, and we go through it through music literacy, super cool ways, and then talking about the musicality of it, so on and so forth. So it's super amazing, and it's going to be released shortly as well. Make sure you're signed up and you know about that. And finally, last but never least, if you are listening to this the week of August 10th, I hope, of 2020, this is for you. If it is after that week, then you can just, stop it right here and go leave us, like a review maybe on iTunes if you're listening to us there. I'm kidding, but serious. Or if you were watching this on YouTube, please make sure you're subscribing. That'd be the bomb. Fabs coming up. F-flat annual back to school conference is this Friday and Saturday, 14th and 15th. It is going to be bomb. There are over 25 speakers. It is pay what you can, all kinds of things that we're having, incredibly diverse speakers is just going to be a great refreshing way for you to continue or start off this school year. I'm so excited to be speaking at it. Dr. Sarah Gulish, this is her brain baby. She has been on the podcast and is going to be on it, as well as my friend Victoria Bowler is going to be on it as well. They're actually doing a shared session on using data in the music classroom. It's going to be amazing. And, a guy by the name of Dr. Rollo Dilworth is going to be their headliner speaker and kicking it all off on Friday for us. So excited. Make sure you check the link in the bio for more information on that. And I think that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Love to hear what you are unlearning right now in regards to choir, what this means to you. I hope this has challenged you and also encouraged you. Perhaps we've had similar moments of unlearning in choir and maybe in life. And as always, know that everything that I seek to do here through Choir Baton is to empower more people singing.